Well, hello, math nerds. This is Math 0028, Section 3.6, the U-Try problems. So this section was all about factoring completely and kind of wrapping all the factoring up together into one section. So what you want to remember is a checklist as far as what you need to look for. First step, greatest common factor. Then, if it's got 2 or 3 terms, look for perfect squares. That's a square. It's not a very good one, but that's what you're looking for next. If you don't have that, then you're going to set up FOIL and probably use trial and error. And the last step is if there's 4 terms, you are going to use grouping. You're going to group it. So look at letter A here. The first step is to look for a GCF. Well, 5 will go into 5, 50, and 120. So we're going to bring out a 5, and then look at the z's, the variables. The smallest one is z. So that's our greatest common factor. And then we go back and we divide it into each term. Okay? So the 5's cancel. Z to the third over z to the first. Remember, subtract the exponents. That's going to give you z squared. Minus 50 divided by 5 is 10. And we get z. And then minus, what the heck is that? 24. And the z's cancel. Okay, so that's what we have left in the parentheses. Now, factoring completely means that now you're going to look and see what's in the parentheses to see if you can factor again. So we bring down 5z. That's still part of your answer. And now we're going to set up FOIL. So since we just have z squared as the first term, I can automatically split that up into z and z. And now I need to think about the factors of a negative 24, and I want them to add up to a negative 10. So if I think about, well, 1 and 24, that's not going to work. But let's try negative 2 and 12, the next factor up from 1 and 24, or negative 12 and 2. Well, negative 12 plus 2 is going to give me that negative 10 in the middle. So I put those in, negative 12 plus 2. And there is your final answer, because it gives you that negative 10 in the middle. All right, letter B, the first term is a negative, so when we bring the greatest common factor out front, we're going to definitely bring a negative sign with it. So 4 goes into all those numbers, so bring out negative 4, and x to the first is the smallest exponent on the x's. So now go back and divide each term by negative 4x all the way through. So the negative 4's cancel, and I have x squared when you subtract. The negative 4's on the middle term cancel, and that's going to be a positive, because a negative over a negative be a positive x. And then 24 divided by negative 4 would be negative 6, and the x's cancel. So that's what we have left in the parentheses. Now we're going to try and factor that into FOIL. So bring down negative 4x, and now we're going to set up FOIL. Since I just have x squared, I can put x and x in the first place of FOIL. And I'm trying to find the factors of a negative 6 that add up to 1 there in the middle. So if I have negative 2 times 3, well, that's it right there. Negative 2 plus 3 gives me positive 1. So that's the set of numbers I need. Negative 2, positive 3. So all of this is your answer for WebAssign. If you don't put in the greatest common factor, you get marked wrong. The whole thing is wrong, so be careful there. Okay, letter C. Good grief, there's a lot of numbers there and variables. Now, 4, 20, and 25, nothing goes into all three of those. But look at your variables. I've got x to the fourth, x to the third, x squared. The smallest is x squared. And then the y's are the y squared in every term. So that is the smallest, even though they're all the same, that's the smallest. So x squared, y squared is my greatest common factor. So I'm going to put that up underneath each term. And then we're going to divide them out. Okay, so we have 4. X to the fourth over x squared would be x squared, and the y squares cancel. And then we have minus 20, and subtract the x's. That's going to be x. The y squares cancel. Plus 25 comes down. The x squares cancel, and so do the y squares. So just 25 on that last term. Now, we've got a trinomial in there, so we want to look at that. We've already taken out the GCF, so remember your next step after greatest common factor is perfect squares. Well, 4x squared is a perfect square, and so is 25. So we bring down x squared, y squared, and this is the special factoring that we just did in section 3.5, okay? The square root of 4x squared is 2x and 2x, and then the square root of 25 is 5 and 5. And remember, if the last term is positive, you go to the middle. They both have to be negative. Now, you want to make sure that you check the outer plus the inner. So you have 2x times negative 5 be negative 10x, and negative 5 times 2x would also be negative 10x, and that gives you that negative 20x that we have in the middle. So that works. There's your answer. Okay? All right, letter D. We do not have a GCF for the numbers, for the coefficients, 9, 9, and 10. Nothing works. But we have a cubed, a squared, and a, so that's a GCF is a. And we've got b, b squared, and b cubed, so b is the smallest. So AB is our common factor there, our greatest common factor. So we're going to go back and divide that into each term. So I have 9. Subtract the a's, you get a squared. The b's cancel. Minus 9. And then when you subtract the a's and b there, you get a b. Minus 10. The a's cancel, but when we subtract the b's, we get b squared. All right, so now what we have left is this trinomial, and we're going to have to see if we can factor it again. This is going to be trial and error because 9 is a perfect square, but 10 on the other end is not. So we're going to need to find the factors of 9, 1 and 9, 3 and 3, and the factors of 10, I have 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Okay, so for 9, I'm going to try 3 and 3. I'm going to try 3a and 3a. And then for 10, I'm going to try 2 and 5. And you have to be careful and make sure you put a b with those last terms because it's 10b squared. So you split the b's up the same way you split up the a's. Now, the last term is a negative, so that means the signs in our parentheses have to be opposites of each other. So I just put in a plus and a minus. Those are opposites of each other. Now we need to check the OI, the outer plus the inner. So the outer term 3a times negative 5b is going to be negative 15ab. And the inner term 2b times 3a is a positive 6ab. Well, negative 15 plus 6 is going to give you negative 9. So it works. So this is your answer. Okay? All right, E and F. So E, we do have a GCF. 2 will go into all those. I think that's the biggest. Yeah. And also A is your smallest exponent. So we're going to factor out a 2a out of each term. All right, so we get 9a squared, because remember, subtract those exponents, plus 24 divided by 2 is 12, and we get a. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4, and the a's cancel. All right, so we have a trinomial left. First thing you want to do is look and see if you have perfect squares on the ends. Well, 9a squared, that's a perfect square, so is 4. So we can use the special factoring to do this. The square root of 9a squared would be 3a and 3a. And the square root of 4 is 2. 2 and 2. So remember, now look at your signs. If the last term is positive, go to the middle sign. You're going to put plus in both parentheses. And now just double check your OI. Check the outer and the inner. 3a times 2, make sure you multiply, is 6a. 2 times 3a is also 6a, and that gives you the 12a that you need in the middle. So all of that is your answer. All right, letter F. You've got 4 terms there, and there's not a GCF all the way through, so this is grouping. So we're going to group the first 2 and the last 2. So in the first 2 terms, y squared is going to be our common factor. So divide by y squared. Okay, so the y squares cancel and we get a minus the y squares cancel on the second term and we just get b. Now bring down that minus sign. In the second terms, the second parentheses, 9 is my common factor there. Okay, but now that sign's going to go with that 9, so it's going to be negative 9 that we put up at the top underneath there. Well, a negative 9 divided by negative 9 cancels to just positive a. And 9 divided by negative 9 is going to be a negative. The 9's cancel, so we just have negative b, like that. So now a minus b, that's how you know you're on the right track, is those parentheses are the same. So we bring that out as our common factor, a minus b, and you put what I call the leftovers, whatever's left over outside, y squared minus 9 goes in the other parentheses. Now, this is the hard part. You think you're done, but here's the nasty part of this problem. Look at the second parentheses, y squared minus 9. Those are both perfect squares. So we're going to bring down a minus b, and we're going to factor y squared minus 9 into FOIL. So that's how you, when you're doing your homework, you're like, what the heck? Where did they get 3 parentheses? This is what happens. So the square root of y squared is y and y. The square root of 9 is 3 and 3. And because that's a negative, plus and minus. They have to be opposites. So that's how you get that crazy looking answer with 3 sets of parentheses. All right. So the next one, we have 8b to the 5th minus 2b to the 3rd. So 2 goes into both of those, and so does b to the 3rd is our smallest exponent. So divide by 2b to the 3rd and 2b to the 3rd. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and b to the 5th over b to the 3rd is b squared, minus those 2b to the 3rd divided by itself is just 1, because that whole thing cancels. Okay? Now, you have perfect squares in the parentheses there. So 2b to the 3rd stays outside, and then you do your perfect square factoring. So the square root of 4b squared would be 2b and 2b. The square root of 1 is just 1 and 1, and the signs have to be opposites. So there's your answer for letter G. And letter H. Remember, the first thing to look for is greatest common factor, which we have a common factor of y. Nothing with the variables, with the coefficients, because there's no number in front of that y except for 1, so you can't use 5. So if we divide by y on all of our terms, we're going to get y squared minus 10y plus 25, because the y's cancel there. Now, look at what you have left in the parentheses. You've got perfect squares on the ends. So bring down the y on the outside, set up FOIL. The square root of y squared is going to be y and y, and the square root of 25 is 5 and 5. And then check your signs. The last term's positive. Go to the middle. They both have to be negative. And the last thing is to double check. Make sure the outer term, which is negative 5y, and the inner term, negative 5 times y, would be negative 5y, and that gives you that negative 10y in the middle. So that is your answer. And I think that's it for 3.6.